Welcome everybody for the next session here today. We are very fortunate to have Mr. CK Toh here today to actually join us to talk a little bit more about automation, the right tools, the right way. Mr. CK has actually have an extensive experience in the ICT world. He has been doing a lot of cloud-based technology. He was actually one of the first pioneers that I was aware of who actually went on the cloud and also did a lot of work on enterprise architecture itself. So he's a very experienced guy. I hope he can actually share a lot more of his experience here today, specific on automation, the right tools, and the right way. CK, we are so thank you to have you here today. I hope you can actually share that topic a little bit more to our audience, and I'm going to hand over the floor to you, CK. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, John, for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I will try to be as what they call as quick, not too fast, but as I can because I believe I'm in between you and lunch. Okay, so like it or not, it's one of those nice, one of those very intriguing type slots that you have before lunch. Okay, my name is CK Totikin. Full name is CK. First of all, thank you very much, Eric, Jan, Lydia, and team for giving me this opportunity to share some of my experience and thoughts about automation, right? What I will do in my slides later, I will try to go through, uh, you know, uh, topics or areas that I believe in order to understand about how you actually go and select the right tool. Uh, there are many areas that you need to consider, right? We also talk a little bit about the background of each of them. Just give me a second while I start the ball rolling. Okay. Oops. Okay. Automation, the right tool and the right way. So after getting the topic right, I was thinking along the line, how do we act? What do I actually share, right? What can I share that's very meaningful for you all? Uh, are we going to talk about the getting the exact right tool? How do you actually get the right tool? That is probably what I'm focusing on because when you don't have the right tool, forget about the right way, right? Um, the actual right way of doing implementing automation is very clear cut. It's about automation, right? Um, and how you go around that also in a way depends on the tool. Uh, and what I will do is I'll take you through an approach that an enterprise architect would use, right? Always go back to the basics. Always go back to why are you doing it for and who are you doing it for. But at the same time, you always look towards the future as well. Whatever tool I'm selecting, not only do I need to address the current immediate need, but I also need to look a bit further. And how do you do that? And I will try to share with you, how people are currently doing that. Which no, I went through that kind of experience, but it become this kind of failure become more and more prominent nowadays due to the changes in technology, and especially the changes that business is experiencing. Right, so you don't have a long time to do things. You don't have a long time to sit back and plan for things and deliver things. You have to do things quite quickly, and you have to be very agile. Okay, so starting with right, so this is a bit of an intro for myself. Like Eric said, I've been around for a long time. So I've lately I had the experience of the opportunity of moving myself, or in a way recreating myself to become an enterprise architect, right? My last role also gave me the opportunity to do a lot of things with cloud. It was a startup company owned by a very large conglomerate, and I had the chance to look at cloud, Amazon, Microsoft. Right, too bad not too much on the other players because those were the two we focus on. And prior to that, I was working for vendors, and my focus area, funnily, is actually business process management, not the measurement one, but the workflow engines and how do you deliver workflow enabled applications on those solutions. Uh, Enterprise content management, which also has workflow, but cater more so for the movement, the capture of movement of physical document, right? So the various categories which I'll go through afterwards. So with this in mind, and then in hindsight, having the opportunity to use those products in the past, having the opportunity of going through the new way of thinking about implementation, which is enterprise architecture way of running IT, implementing IT, or doing digital transformation, I've come to the conclusion that whatever whatever I'm going to suggest afterwards will probably be a bit more encompassing and a bit more comprehensive when you're actually selecting the right tool, right? So my definition of a right tool, the right way is the right way to select the right tool, right? So so I'm looking at it slightly differently. Yeah. Okay. So in the agenda today, we just go back to grounds. Let's catch up on the idea of automation, and then I will talk about some of the tools that's been around for a long time. Actually, a lot of them have been around for quite a while. They themselves have evolved, right? Some have died by the wayside because of the change in market, change in technology, change in requirement, right? Okay, and then the selection process. I put down in bracket, get it right or else, right? Uh, the worst thing you can do is select the wrong product, right? You select the wrong product, you cannot use it for your immediate needs even. But sometimes you need to think further. You need to select the right product, not only for your immediate needs, but as a visionary to your organization to drive digitalization, to say you need to have in the back of mind, whatever I'm selecting, would it work for the future, would it work for the immediate, right? Can I actually be agile and continue to support my business? That's very critical. Okay. And of course I'll end with a summary and some Q&A. So now let's move on. But when we talk about automation, I'll just cover a bit of what is automation, just that we are all in line. And automation in our age, right? Digital age. And actually, our digital age did not start in 70s, did not start with Gen Z, right? It all started all the way back when the first microchip was created. And what are the objectives of what they call the automation? Why do we want to automate? Why do we want to go through the trouble to automate? Why do we want to invest millions, if not and millions of dollars to automate, right? And automation end to end in an IT environment, automating a process is not something trivial. It's not something that you can accommodate in a single year, but a 1 year budget, that kind of thing, right? You need to plan it properly and make sure you are always on the right track. Right. What is automation? Uh, Automation is all just about using technology. In this particular case, the definition is technology applications where human input is minimized. Okay. When I first started on automation, I think as the technology grew, the capability grew. Uh, many people are always trying to go through to achieve something called straight through processing. We should talk about a bit later, whereby there is no human intervention, right? During 20 years ago, in order to achieve that, some of the other technologies that's required were not available for us to explore that. Now and moving forward, we are getting closer and closer, right? So is it a new concept? If you are someone new in the workforce, someone younger, yeah, it's not new. We're still talking about it, right? The funny thing was, I started looking at workflow technology and enablement way back in early 90s, right? And I was focused on that. I've been lucky enough to experience many type of solution. We've been talking about it, and yet at this point in time, many organizations are still saying, I want to automate. So what is it that we're trying to automate? Basically, it's anything that is possible that we want to try to automate to reduce costs and all that, right? And of course, in the human realm, we always have problems with if I automate, what will happen to my human actors and all the stuff lah. So that's a different story that we talk about maybe under the ESG discussion, right? Another seminar. Okay. So now, if I just take you all the way back, 5,000 years to the Chang dynasty, the Shang dynasty, to the pharaohs, right? Humans were already automating, right? If you base it on the first statement, whereby humans input is minimized, that's one. Secondly, I will also say not only minimize but productivity is increased, right? Which is the second time we have to do both. We either reduce the human being or you ensure that the human being do more. So now, years ago in the Pharaoh, we already have this. No, we have already started having all these tools to help men become more productive, right? And over time, rather than having a cow to do your what they call your stone mill to grind flour, we then move into having windmills, right? Having water mills to do that. In fact, even up to 200 years ago, people were still using water mills and all that, right? And later on, we were starting to use some sort of basic machinery, right? Um, and then further on, nearer to maybe last century, we are talking about the automation of factories by using steam, by using electricity, right? I think electricity was a major game changer. But don't forget, that was electricity is only about 150 years ago. 150 years ago, right? Then we come down to all the way to where we are now, right? The era where electricity, information technology is, and architecture is driving all those things, right? Now, right. So that's where we are. Unfortunately, 90% of organizations uh, still have a lot of manual processes. Okay, there are some officially there's some manual processes that cannot be automated because you still need to have human intervention, but it still can be digitized, right? You still can push it through, right? However, there are many times people are not implementing for several reasons. One of the key reasons I've seen is actually the trust in the systems, right? Uh, that is getting lesser and lesser as the senior managers now are getting to be very, very savvy in technology. The other one is actually the technology to return the same results 100% of the time, right? For many of these complex workflow. The simple ones, like if A is more than 1,000, that's easy to handle, right? Okay. So in this diagram itself, how do we tie up with the one IR industrial revolution and all that stuff, right? Because right now we're supposed to be in fourth industrial revolution, whereby we are supposed to do digital transformation. Okay. Everybody is talking about digital transformation, but do people know what exactly is digital transformation? You go to a seminar, someone would talk about it, but in the real world, when the CEO talk about it, does he really know what is digital transformation? Right? He probably read the management book, right? And what are the prerequisites that you should have in order for you to for you to do digital transformation? That's another key point, right? So now in terms of first IR is when we start using coal, then we start using gas and oil, then we start using nuclear and electricity, right? We are here. It's all about internet and renewable energy, right? So renewable energy is something that I think there are a lot of seminars on. So as one of the fourth IR, automation is still very important. You have all this thing about IoT sending information back, right? Very good. I collect all the information, but is it worth spending all the information to then put in a database for you, for the data scientists to actually come up with a dashboard that you look at when you want to look at? Yes, maybe, but when you want something more real time, right? When the information come in, how do you want to act on it? How do you want the system to inform us, right? One key example is that let's say in a telecommunication company, we have IoTs going around. IoTs from a tower coming in saying that the tower electricity is down, right? So we need to know immediately how to respond to it. And in fact, if you look at the process end to end, you need to basically automate, qualify the problem, and then send. Who do you send to? Which workforce do you send to? Right? Do you send to a set what they call pool of a resource. So those are all process automation that you can really look at, some of which we can do immediately right now if you have the proper tool. Some of which it can be a bit more complex because you probably need some sort of a artificial intelligence and some other tools to do, right? So I'll try to cover some of those later. Now, even before we start talking about finishing with fourth industrial revolution, we are already talking about five, right? So and things are getting to be quite interesting in a way, but also quite dangerous because right now the digital divide between people who have and people who don't is already big enough, right? When you move to 5 IR, which is basically still not 100% defined. One thing I read was actually a collaboration between human and machines, right? So welcome Skynet, right? That time. So when you come to the time, those countries that can adapt, those companies that can adapt, they will leapfrog forward. But those that are still struggling with writing on a piece of paper, taking to the machine, scan it in, and then passing the paper around for approval, good luck to them. They probably would not be around for too long, right? Okay. So now, just a few minutes on automation in the IT age. Now this is the IT age. So again, when you look at just the IT age, automation did not start in the 90s, did not start in the year in the 21st century, right? Automation started when they've created the first computer. Because uh, you know uh, uh, at you know typing things in into a system to collect data, and then somebody else somewhere can look at the data and approve. That is already part of taking a first step into automation, right? So over time, I foresee. I will go into a little bit more detail. There are different tools that have come out. Even for myself, right, there have been different tools that have come out in my short career with workflow, less about 20 years, right? Uh, a lot of different tools have come out. Some are more general, cover a broad function. Some are more specific. So later on, I will share with you how I think you should be looking at selecting the right tool that you need, right? Not for now, but maybe for a bit further in time, right? Because always money is always a problem, right? Okay, so now then the other thing is that the success of these tools, right, depended on the maturity, right? The maturity of the process, the maturity of the organization to take in, the maturity of the technology, maturity of the supporting technologies, right? Not workflow for it to reach its potential. You need all the other technologies, some of the other technologies to be available as well, right? You also need data. Okay, so and this I will talk about later when I mentioned just now, right? Do people really understand what digital transformation is? Whichever book you talk about, in order to digital transform, you need data. That's one criteria. In many organizations, that data is not available. So, so you need to understand what you actually can do with automation. And lastly, okay, the different technologies appear in different times to enhance the process automation. This will be the supporting technology, right? Just a note, just to share with you. So we started in the 40s with someone keying into IBM mainframe, right? That's how we go. And someone then thought about, okay, once I key in, how do I notify the other party? I will call, right? So what they did was they actually built in, inboxes and outboxes for the different users. Different users log in. I will see if they already log in. I'll pop up a message saying, okay, there's something else is created. Because that is simple workflow, right? And that is still happening in many organizations as well, right? Especially when you're operating on the old mainframes and things like that. Then, of course, we in the late 70s, 80s, especially when PC starts coming in, when our client server, we started looking at things like Lotus Notes, right? And they were the king. Nobody, you guys, the younger ones, will probably not hear about it, right? These were actually routing things from one place to another, including form and stuff like that. Uh, but there were limitations, but it worked for that era, right? And then, of course, when things got a bit more complicated, we started looking at workflow engines, basically systems that has been that can do complex workflow, and they can do things like timer escalation. If people don't do their work after 2 hours, that's how things work on, right? And some of these names that you probably don't hear now, OpenText had one. You will probably have a BEA WebLogic had one as well. IBM still have theirs, right? And of course, an organization called TIBCO, which is still around, have theirs as well. Oracle bought some, right? So Once we have the workflow engine in, especially when the big organizations started compiling, started what they call it, putting things together as a product, then the SOA products come up, right? SOA product, service-oriented architecture, comprise of workflow capability, comprise of integration capability, comprise of bus capability for very high performance integration. That series of product came out, and as they go along, they become more and more expensive, right? And of course, there were other things that came along, but lately people started talking about RPA, right? So RPA, they start about talking about RPA being used for automation. RPA has been so also for doing integration, right? But I will share with you hopefully some of the things that you should watch out for before you select certain technology, right? And of course, AI based is also very important, right? AI based technology, AI based to support workflow. So the goal of many organizations is to when they do automate processes, they do this thing called decision management. They want to target for decision management, right? All along, we always look at things like we have very happy if we do things like decision support. The difference is, for example, decision support. If you're applying for bank on a loan, right? So the traditional style, even if you do it on workflow, when it goes to the officer, he will need to pick up the phone or log into another system to check for things like uh, what they call police criminality, criminal records. So they could check for whether this person is bankrupt or not, whether the person has got a bad credit rating, right? Those things they will check either on system or phone. Now, over the last 10, 15 years, when interface integrating between the different agencies were becoming a more matured and stable, uh, what they will do is just collect all this information to present, right? To present for the officer, to present to the officer for him to approve, right? For him to facilitate his approval. Now, that is decision support. Humans still do it, right? Decision management, basically, no more humans. Right? Based on the results they automatically get from the integration and all that stuff, they will approve or reject. Okay, that is decision management. Of course, now I think there's a lot of hybrid, whereby if it's an obvious case for approval, they'll go ahead. If it's an obvious case for reject, they will reject. But a lot of cases are still go to a human being to apply for the what you call the knowledge lah, to apply the gut feel of this person. Now, if that can be supplied by an AI agent, what do you think? Or the officer would not be the officer would not be needed at all, right? Maybe only needed for some very like borderline cases. The borderline to going to him now is probably 60% of the cases going to him to look at. But when you have AI, you maybe have 1 or 2%, 5% borderline. So the system would then be really an end-to-end automated system. Okay, so that's the kind of things that we were trying to strive for 20 years ago, but it wasn't available because you don't have this new capability like AI, which is also very important when you're talking about scanning and imaging, right? All right. So so future will always be AI already, and I think future will also be linking into IoT devices, right? Future will be linking into IoT devices to make things a lot faster, a lot more real time. Okay, there's no point there's no point for the workflow to know that I have been to KLCC, right? Yesterday, before they send me a offer from a let's say from a phone shop or from Levi's jeans, that there's a sales there, right? I was already there. So when you move into IoT and AI space, you can actually build workflow such that I can send this guy a promotion when I'm actually there, right? So things like that, we are heading towards that. So some of the technology, I mean, this is quite historical as well, right? So these are the things that we have gone through. So hopefully that when you actually start looking at things and vendors start like to try and throw in a lot of terms, right? You would then familiarize yourself with some of these terms, right? So, so some of the things that we look at is actually things like integration. We look at things like graphical designer. So we design a workflow like on Visio, right? Not currently, I think many medium level systems are still using coding. I can route the systems, but I actually put into that like an Excel spreadsheet when it goes to who. But graphical interface is like a visual, and they draw BPMN, right? So complex events processing is something that 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 allows us to ingest real-time information, right? So once I ingest the real-time information, then I can actually decide whether I want to start a workflow or not, right? That kind of thing. Form builder is built to build application. Rules engine, basically we are separating the rules of the workflow from the application itself, right? The benefit will be when you change the rules, you don't have to change the application. So you dissect. Yeah, there's a dichotomy between the two, right? So make things maintenance a lot cheaper and more efficient. So some of these things actually come out. Some of them are no longer relevant, but nevertheless, yeah, this I hope this gives you a, automation in the IT age. We are not we are not the ones who discover the requirement. We are not the ones who started the servicing this requirement, right? It all started way back in 40s and 50s, right? For IT itself, but for other things, it probably started about 5,000 years ago. Okay, so we are actually the this is actually the we are actually trying to continue the legacy of making things right and making things faster. Okay, so the objective very simple: to automate and be more efficient. Very very simple. Do more with less, right? Or do more with less, or do the same with less. So you do more things with with the same people, or you do the same amount of work with less people. That's all it does, right? Of course, there are some people whom I want to do. You want to do more with less lah. You do more things. You do what they call your sorry, how should I say it? Never mind. I think fine. That's 2 point, right? Then the pinnacle of automation is to have straight through processing. Okay, so if you have and the reason why we always have processes, always have processes that needs to go to a human being is because we need them to check, right, on things. That is now overcome with the availability of easier integration and easier extraction of data. But at the very foundation of it, we cannot, at this point in time, even AI has to prove itself lah, cannot uh, do a lot of things that you need the human intelligence and human logic to do. Over time, the technology supposedly is available, but the implementation, uh, how costly it is, I'm not sure, right? Like for example, the technology can do it. You can even have a big company's AI platform defeating the world champion in chess, right? So that can be done. Uh, Availability of technology versus applicability and practicality of the technology are two different things. Right. So straight through processing is automatic. We went through that with no manual intervention at all, right? So some of the benefits that we look at is always increase in effectiveness, productivity, and all that. So once we actually automate a process, right? To automate a process, we design the process. Once we design the process, we sign off. So you have to make sure that it's everything will be governed, standardized, and governed already. So I cannot go to a wrong person or go skip a step and things like that, right? So everything is governed. So you wouldn't have any problem with auditing. The auditor comes in, look at it, they sign off, right? Improve transparency. Everybody knows what everybody does and when they do it. Auditing will be easier because most of these systems have got detailed audit logs for audit to make sure that the people are it goes through a correct step and stuff like that. Minimization of errors, so you don't have people checking the wrong thing. One critical thing, especially in the digitalization world, transformation world, is the expansion to additional ecosystems, right? So if I already automate my process and the new technology always have hooks, right? You can easily look at automating end to end with your suppliers as well. For example, right? If it's, let's say, a invoicing process, you're automating that, you can connect with the supplier, you can connect with the bank, right, which is already done. So you actually have many options to extend to an end-to-end world, right? Um, and if you do it in a slightly different manner using the similar technology, you are already talking about moving yourself to the platform business, right? And that is a whole different ball game already. Okay, and with all these tools available, from my personal experience, not only from academic, you can actually deliver workflow enabled applications a hell of a lot faster, right, than having to develop. And later on, there's a new range of products, the technology that I'm going to suggest that you have a look at if you have a need for all this, right? Core tools. Some of the core tools that came along over the years. Some of these are enterprise application. So enterprise application initially have very basic workflow, but over time, people like SAP, uh, Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle, they have already incorporated very complex workflow capability in the application, right? But bear in mind, if your whole environment is 90% on Oracle or Microsoft, then you may be limited by the licensing factor, lah, right? Because workflow inside ERP will require the users to be the participants to be a user of workflow of the ERP systems, right? And if you buy the licenses, that's when they try to recoup some of their investment. Business process engine is typical. There are many still around. The ones that I used to work with in the 90s, most of them were no longer around, like Fujitsu's Teamware Flow. There's a company called Plexus, which is a fantastic Plexus Flow. Staffware, I actually work for them. That's been taken over by TIPCO. Uh, but then again, when all these big guys are taken over by smaller guys, it brings up opportunities for new technology, right? There's quite a few open source around, and also the last one we work with, which was very simple and very cheap, right? A product called Agile Point. There are many of them, right? Many of them all over the place, right? Okay, so you need to identify, right? Process engine also come in different flavor, like they come with different capability. Some come very close to SOA capability, like they have got reporting in there. They've got process on analytics together. They also have got integration software altogether, right? Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about process designer, how you design the workflow. You have SOA solutions, right, where workflow is actually a critical part of the system. So the typical SOA guys, the complex SOA guys that we talk about, the two main ones for a long time. I'm not sure whether there are any more right now. You have got TIPCO, Oracle, and then you got OpenText. But I want to highlight that the smaller companies, more innovative companies, especially the cloud companies, have created new technologies, not in competition with SOA. They don't do exactly the same thing, but they deliver exactly the same business benefits. Okay, bear that in mind. When you're doing all this research and delivery and selection, business benefit. What does the business want to achieve? Right? It's not about bringing a new technology and all that. What do the business want to achieve? Keep that in mind, and you will never go wrong. Okay, document management, your typical document management in the old days was just to store document, but all of them have some sort of workflow engine. Okay, right. Sorry about that. Document capture. This is your scanning and all that stuff. These are some of the tools that will be needed when you are talking about end to end. The last one that I've experienced with is actually robotics process automation. Be very careful. It's the new kid on the block. Every single vendor. Because it's new, right? Every single vendor would start talking about automation this and automation that. But are they talking about end-to-end automation or just automation of a single function, right? So you need to understand if your need is to actually make your help desk easier, right? Whereby your help desk will work on, let's say, Siebel, right, or a CRM system, help desk system. But when a call comes in, he needs to log into 5 different systems, okay, to get all the information. There, in that kind of environment, your RPA will be excellent, right? uh, or you have a simple integration, like for example, you have a trouble ticketing system, and another your one of your vendors, your managed services, have a trouble ticketing system. You have your workflow, your RPA sitting in between to actually copy this thing to this thing. It works. But if you have more complicated, I need 20 steps workflow, 30 steps workflow integrated to 5 system, it may not be the ideal things that you look at, right? So be very careful when you look at technology, and again, fall back to what your business requirements are. Okay, so you have a lot of supporting tools. I did mention a bit about rules engine. Of course, integration is always going to be there, right? Because automation without integration, you better go back 20 years ago, lor, right? um, you have to, you have a lot of manual activities within an automated process. This is ridiculous, isn't it, right? So your process of going from a bank officer to the bank loan approval to the regional officer, that's automated. But everything else that they need to do the work is actually physical, right? You have to wait for the postman to send. It doesn't work lah, right? So without integration, nothing works. But of course, integration now, you got new technology coming in, new ways of doing it, like microservices of doing it, right? Very, very, very interesting. So you have to look at those kind of things as well. Document management, besides being a core tool, right? If you actually look at routing of documents, document management is also required to store supporting documents. Okay. uh, Workflow, don't my personal opinion is, do not implement if you have requirements for things like attachments, things like scan images in your process. You cannot do without one document management or another, right? Of course, if you are using Microsoft 365 or Oracle, they already provided this kind of capability, so you have to integrate. Don't pick a system that store documents in a file server somewhere. Okay, you will run into trouble with security. You will run into trouble with probably governance, right? And also, operation wise, how are you going to back up and all the stuff will be very tough, right? So in my case, my last position, everything must go into SharePoint, right? So because it's free anyway. Um, of course, you talk about form builders, document capture is your scanning and all that. Now, some process actually starts from scanning. Okay, so I'll just take a very simple. I will just take a very simple example, right? There are two ways to automate a loans processing. Someone submitting a loan document. Okay, you can do one way, which is the traditional way, whereby I take the application and I key in the major details, right? And I stamp and I pass it to someone else. That's one way, okay? And somewhere down the line, someone will either have to scan in the information, or you have to you have to make copies around, which is the automating a business process of manual activities. We don't want to do that, right? The most effective one would be someone just you give to the officer stamps and give you a number. This is my number. I scan in. That's it, and the system will do all the extraction of data and start the business process flow. That should be the ultimate way of for you doing it. Like for example, a telecommunication company, right? You sign a form saying what do you call it? I need to apply for this service, is scan in and start the flow, right? Alternatively, many organizations like some of our telcos locally, right, you actually fill in the details, and after you fill in the details, a form will be printed out for you to sign off, right? So some these are some of the innovative way that people have done process, right? Analytics is also very important. Now that you have automated, you have got all this information about who does what and when, you are able to do all this performance and throughput analysis lah, which you will use to further improve your process and you move forward. So some analytics, I think when you look into acquiring the right technology, I think this is also a very important functionality, right? That you must have. Some workflow are quite cheap and stuff like that, but you need to buy additional modules to actually put things in. Okay, so oh boy, I'm running a bit time. So now the right process. How do we select the right process? Uh, so the current process that most people go through is very simple, right? I've got a requirement from the bosses or from the users. I go and gather the requirements. I gather the requirements of what they need from this system. I will do a tender. I will do a selection, and then I try and deploy. Right? Very traditional, right? Me as an enterprise architect, I would look at it a slightly different way, lah, right? So is this enough? Probably not, because you are looking at very specific requirements, right? Uh, what is the real scope of the tool? Do we know, right? Just the requirements alone, we may not know, right? The users may not know what they actually want to do with the tool, right? They say, I want to do things faster, right? So things like that, right, that you need to watch out for. Uh, with the tool, are we digitally transforming? Can we be? If you are digitally transforming, we need to look at, what other opportunities we will have, lah. Do we have a bigger picture, right? We need to look at the bigger picture. So automation tools, bear in mind, are actually enterprise level tools. They are not supposed to be for one department. Uh, they are not supposed to be for one function. They are enterprise level tools. So with that in mind, if your requirements come in is very specific for one function, one department, you have to take a step back and see what's the enterprise requirements for that, right? So these are step by step that I went through. I'm going to go a bit faster on this, right? So no, uh, um, automation tool are enterprise tools, right? You must be more diligent in exactly asking the correct question. What is my enterprise requirement? You need to look at the big picture, right? Um, so following the best practice framework. So if you guys have gone through TOGAF before, this is the framework that we use, right? So the first question you have to ask is, where is the organization in this digital scape? This is to tell you where you are, right? Bosses might want to say, I want to be digitally transformed, but digital transform will have certain criteria, right? You need to be in the cloud to enable the fast turnaround time. You need to have internal development again to do Scrum easily and stuff like that. And definitely you need to have data, right? If you are very backward, you can't digitally transform, right? I'll just show you how to do that afterwards. Determine the target where we want to be. uh, you look at the roadmap, so we can plug in the things that we need to acquire over time to reach where we want, right? So in an architecture word, we always say you can actually do it by phases, or we talk about transition architectures. Doesn't stage we do it, we put in more functionality, and then only you identify the tools, right? Because you would already have a forward view, what you want to do, what the organization, not what you want to do, what the organization wants to do, or what the organizations will need. Then you put your requirements on top of what the users say they want, right? And then only then you select. In that manner, you are not only catering for what some of your users want now, but you are catering to what your organization would need in the midterm, near term, midterm. I think long term will probably be too far for many people, all right? uh, and then in that process, you are actually transforming yourself to take the lead lah, in working with your business, right? So you're actually planning on behalf of them. And lastly, you determine the prerequisites, what we have now, right? Okay, so to know where we are, just to clarify, we have got three different levels of our digital journey. Okay, many people are still stuck at this tail end, at the back, right? We are still trying to digitize things. 50% of our effective operational documents are still inside my crown boxes, right? So what I should be focusing on this organization is actually doing digitization. Okay. Uh, then you talk about digitalization. This is the step where people start looking at technology to do workflow, not to transform. Digital transformation is actually the holy grail whereby I enable my organization to live in the digital world. Right. So I'm ready to do digital world. I am using digital transformation to find more opportunities, more business revenue. I'm using the digital channel, right? So many bosses or many managers will say, I'm doing digital transformation, but actually what they're doing, they're scanning 12 million pages of documents they have in their warehouse, right? That's actually digitization. For that kind of organization, for them to go to straight through processing, AI enabled situation, uh, being on par with maybe a Grab or someone like that, or Uber, it's going to take a long while. Okay, so you need to understand where you are historically. You understand where you are, then you know where you're going, right? So this is more detail on that. So on what certain people do. So there are 5 phases: digitize information, organize information, which we have been doing since for the last 30 years or 40 years, right? Then you start looking at automation. This is what I have been doing for I was doing for the good part of my career, 20 years. And of course, lately was actually transforming digital, right? And of course, uh, you can look at the detail of the slides later when you can download. And of course, the way to know where we are, the nature of the organization is different, right? So when we have nothing, we are just doing business as usual, right? When we are moving up the next step, present and active, that means we're actually looking at pockets of doing it. Formalization, we already have an IT department or IT head looking at digitization. Strategic, that guy probably become a CDO already. Converge, everything is merged up together. There's a digital DNA. You have governance available. It's part of the business service. In this particular area, you probably have an enterprise architect to help you do the work, right? And of course, moving down to level 6, we're actually using technology not only as a competitive supporting function, but actually moving forward, right? So if less and this is when CEO come back and say I want to do digital transformation, they are looking at advantages for this kind of thing, right? But If you are given, let's say, I need to digitally transform, right? Write me a plan, and you are still stuck between here, then you have your work cut off for you, right? You need to set the expectation correct, okay? So know where you want to be, very simple, right? Based on the steps and stuff like that. How do you guess what you want to be? So if there's a requirement for you now to look at automating, let's say something, or bringing in a automation engine, so you ask the questions, right? You don't verify the requirements of the business user, right? That's very secondary already. Most important thing, you want to know what you're doing for this thing, what are the business values that you're trying to reach, what are the business objectives you are trying to acquire. So look back at business, you confirm all that, then you will be able to plan for a roadmap, what you want to do. And maybe you still start with a very simple thing to cater for the current requirement. However, you got a view in front of you already, right, where you want to go. So if those new requirements come in, you would have bought a product that is able to expand, add on for you to cater for the future. Okay, if you just look at very specifically one department requirement, in 2 to 3 years, you'll probably end up with a situation whereby this product cannot work anymore. And then the question will be, how come you buy such a limited product, right? It happened to me, it's an experience now. So look further, okay? So you determine the roadmap, so you have your baseline, you have your end goal, right? So there are different technologies that you can look at, and and apply, right? And so if you know where you are, you know where your organization need to go, then you can plan out what are the key functionalities that you can bring in, right? So maybe, for example, right now I just want to start with a simple, someone submit a form and then I move through, right? Okay, I can either buy a product that's able to do other things, or I can buy a product that only do that. So what happens when I can further automate some processes? Automate, meaning decision management. What happens when I need to do attachments? What happens when I want to do print report? Then you'll be stuck, right? And you have to go back to your bosses and say, boss, I have to replace the system, right? In order to cater for requirement. So think long term, so that your right product is right for now, also right for the near future, right for the medium future. Far away future, I think technology changed lah. So you can't commit to anything like that. Right. So, okay, identify the tools. So these are some of the key tools. I've mentioned some of them. What I want to bring forward to you is this new new breed of tools called rapid application development. Right. I have been working with one. Uh, uh, Maybe I think I can just mention the name. One of it is actually our system. The other one is actually Mendix, right? So all this kind of tool, they are very good. The previous rapid application development system will just develop a database application for you, right? I need to write, I need to key in something, I need to print something, I need to print a report. This set of tools already have pre-built workflow capability, pre-built integration capability. So if you are looking at a rapidly deploying workflow system that is already pre-built with all the integration points, and these guys are actually getting developed a lot faster, you may then explore bringing this people. If you're doing a tender, have a look at to bring this range of products in. Okay, so but again, you need to watch out for cost lah. So what are the things you should watch out for enterprise application? I did mention the scope is always within the application. Licenses outside the application may not be beneficial to you. Business process designer and engine and designer, these are expensive products but very capable. And nowadays they can integrate to your ERP, integrate your CRM, so it's fine. Um, but you need a storyline to tell, because if you already your CRM already doing some CRM workflow, and your finance doing some CRM work, some finance workflow. So you have to decide whether you're going to replace everything or you're going to integrate with those workflow. That's another decision you have to have, right? So I mentioned a bit about that document. I mentioned RPA. You have to be very careful, right? Uh, you have to be very careful looking at what is the technology limitation. What do they mean by automation? They're definitely not talking about end-to-end process automation. Okay, they are good for certain selected outcomes. Yeah, but there's also a lot of conditions and prerequisites you need to look at. Okay, One example, so if let's say you have a large number of physical documents to digitize, so basically it's basically about documents, like for example, big government agencies like immigration having like 20, 30, 80 million pages of documents, that's when you put in. Okay. John, just give me 2 to 3 minutes more.
Yep, sure. Sure.
Yeah, ask if
Always.
so ask if there are processes and stuff like that. This one you probably look at document capture and document management. You may need a workflow engine if it gets a bit complicated, right? Like I said, document management workflow engines are very simple. Then of course you have got a big thing lah, like a online sales order with CRM and all the stuff. Maybe your CRM can do. Assuming your CRM cannot do, you want something independent. So you would look at business process engine, document management may need integration software, right? So the key question is you need to confirm your processes involved. You need to confirm what's the next step with the business, right? So for example, if your pilot project on the workflow is actually your sales order under Salesforce or Microsoft, and it can do the work, no problem, right? But your bosses are looking at something that you can cut across all line of business, then you better look for independent business process management engine, right? Okay. So in summary, I'd say automate the tools. Automation tools are enterprise tools, right? So you have to think digitalization. You cannot think about the small things that, like for example, even like for if you want to look at ERP, you're only looking at ERP only, right? But in this particular case, you're looking at enterprise level tool set that you need to really consider in terms of business delivery, value delivery as well. Don't jump into a decision, no matter how tight it is. Understand, or also understand what the vendor mean when they say certain things. Ask them to prove it. Okay, show it to you. Go in detail. Understand the baseline and target states. What are you trying to achieve? Where you are, right? If your organization are still in a digitization world and the boss's expectation and giving you a KPI or digital transformation, you say, can boss, 5 years, right? So, but if they're already like towards the end of digitalization, where most processes are online, then yes, you can consider moving to that level, right? Um, Evaluate the technologies you require to reach the state, right? Prepare a roadmap and then select a long-term plan, right? Most important thing you should watch out for: do you have the data? Do you have the maturity in your business to do all this automation, right? Do you have the organization desire to do all this automation, right? Most managers still want to look at a piece of paper, right? Those are the kind of challenges you probably come across besides selecting the right tool. Okay, so yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. So sorry I have to rush through a little bit as I talk a bit too long for the earlier part. John, are you there?
Yes, CK. Thank you so much. I think we've just run out of time. Anyway,
Right.
thank you again, CK, for sharing such a very, very intriguing way of looking at it, right, from the enterprise architecture view. Because I've never thought of it from that angle, right, how it actually impacts when we actually do automation in that sense. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today, CK, for sharing your view. We hope to engage you more in
Okay.
our future session to share a lot more on how
Should
this we
should
can
I
implement.
should I answer one or two questions that's been posted just very
Yeah,
quickly?
sure. Let's look at,
Uh,
well, try to have time for one quick question. Let me just
yeah.
perhaps post it up. Hang on a sec. So one of the question that has been so-called that I think I will select is this one. It's called, is RPA a hype? So just quickly perhaps spend 2 minutes to wrap that up.
Okay. I understand. We implemented unsuccessfully lah RPA in my previous organization.
Oh, okay.
Uh, you need to be very clear what you want to do and you match up with the RPA, right?
Oh,
So you don't want to
okay.
diverge a little bit. So, like I mentioned just now, if you are talking about a very simple movement of data from one system to another, it could be very effective, right?
Right.
Uh, but and or for example, in a help desk, you want to press a button and then everything is copied from one system to another automatically so I can see, right?
Hmm.
Question for that is that you also need to look for licensing, like how much it costs, how does
True.
the
True.
licensing work, the
Yep.
infrastructure work, right? To use it as a replacement for integration,
Hmm.
probably not.
Yep.
Low volume, maybe, right? Security will have a big problem,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yes,
Because
that's another concern. Yep.
yeah, because this RPA actually uses the clients to talk to the system. So you need to create a user ID
Mm.
that is being used by the RPA, right? So the challenges that we had was security was very very strict on that, right?
Yep.
And we use it for the wrong reasons, lah.
Mm.
So and there's a lot of pitfalls, like you need to work, you need to be, but it does work for what it was originally designed for.
I see.
Okay,
Okay.
it may not work for what the salesman tell you to, lah, right? So because sometimes people oversell a little bit. Okay,
Right. We need to validate, right, some of this so-called hype in the
yeah,
industry of about automation, what it claims it can do, right? So I think take your
yep,
guidance as well. Your advice, please validate. Thank you. Right,
okay,
guys, we've run out of time. I really like to hope to get extended a bit longer. Unfortunately, we run out of time. CK, thank you so much for joining us, be our guest speaker, and sharing your experience. I
okay.
think
Thank you.
we've gotten a lot of insight from this sharing as well. And like I said, we hope to see you in future sessions. Right, just to let everybody know, we do have a panel discussion coming up very quickly at 1 o'clock. Please join us in that panel discussion. I myself, together with Eric and Bala, will be joining Yan as well to do that panel discussion. So I hope to see everybody in that session as well.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
listening.
CK. Thank you. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.